Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. I have unfortunately and foolishly decided to subject myself to the entire Disturbed discography in preparation for their upcoming album Divisive. So, I guess today we're reviewing every Disturbed album. Because, why not? Why the hell not? That's why. Did you want to know why? That's the reason. That's why. You're welcome. Alright, all jokes aside, no nonsense, no tomfoolery, being 110,000% serious here. I had actually never listened to a solid chunk of Disturbed's discography up until, I decided to make this video. On Discord and during the last live stream as well, I spoke to a lot of people who just kind of assumed that I hated Disturbed. I'm not a huge fan of the songs that I have heard, but honestly, for the most part, I don't have much of an opinion on them at all because I had never really listened to a solid chunk of their discography. I'm familiar with the big hits, like, Down with the Sickness, and their covers of Land of Confusion and The Sound of Silence, but aside from that, honestly, I may as well be brand new to this fucking band. Despite the fact that they were putting out seminal records when I was like a fucking 10-year-old, 11-year-old, I just never really knew much about this band until I was a teenager, and by that point, I was getting into Guns N' Roses and Metallica and Slayer, and Disturbed was just kind of off my radar. And then by the time they might have been on my radar, they weren't even active. So, yeah. Long story short, despite what you may believe about me, I really don't know much about Disturbed, and what I do know, I don't have much of an opinion on. Until now, that is. Duh. So, yeah, anyone suggesting that I'm biased, anyone suggesting that I shouldn't do this because I hate Disturbed, you can take that argument back where you found it in the trash. Because, yeah. Anyways, reviewing every Disturbed album. As per the norm, with videos of this style, I will be talking about each album in order of release, assigning each a score out of 5. I'm not interested in live albums, demos, EPs, or compilations. I'm not interested in anything released by a solo project or a side project stemming from Disturbed. I am focusing specifically on their 7 studio albums, not including the upcoming Divisive. You'll have to tune in another time to hear my thoughts on that album. With all that in mind, let's officially get started with The Sickness, released March 7th, 2000 via Giant and Reprise Records. I was only 5 years old when this came out. That is crazy for me to think about and say out loud. Despite having not made it to number 1 on the Billboard charts, unlike every other Disturbed album, this remains Disturbed's most popular and successful album, having debuted in the Billboard 200, having sold over 5 million records in the United States alone, and having, as of 2018, been certified platinum 5 times. That's kind of crazy to think about. This album is actually a really big hit. It's actually a really big deal. And it also has some of the band's most well-known hit singles and songs and tracks and such. And it's also really silly, like edgy, over-the-top, cornball, hot topic metal. I mean, holy fucking shit. This thing sounds like it was created by a bunch of 11-year-olds. There's something weirdly charming and endearing about the level of, like, hyper over-the-top juvenile anger that's coming out of this thing. I mean, this thing just consistently sounds like a bunch of fucking preteens going apeshit. The guitar tone is, like, really crisp and hefty. The drums are really loud. And, like, the vocal antics on this thing are insane. David Draymond has, like, a really strong, confident voice, but he also throws in, like, a lot of weird little things here and there that almost kind of sound like somebody trying to very poorly emulate Jonathan Davis. I mean, you don't get the beatboxing per se, but, I mean, you may as well. I mean, I don't know what else to call the fucking, like, ooh, ah, Like that fucking shit from Down with the Sickness. I can't do it. David Draymond can. I don't know what that's called to this day, but that is corny with a capital K, if you ask me. I know it sounds like I'm trashing this thing, but honestly, I enjoyed this record. Had I been 11 or 12 at the time this had come out, I probably might have enjoyed this thing, you know? Had I been like a 90s rock nu metal kid, maybe this would have resonated with me. I mean, Down with the Sickness, honestly, kind of a banger. It kind of slaps. It kind of goes hard. That main riff, honestly, kind of filthy. Like, it's got those big dynamic grooves. That chorus is, like, really memorable, really catchy, really great. I mean, it just kind of digs into your fucking ear. Same with, like, Stupefy, the voices, the game. It's not a perfect album. There are definitely some songs that hit a lot harder than others. I feel like it loses a little bit of its luster and appeal after, like, maybe the first 5 songs or so. It's pretty heavy-handed in that regard. But it never gets boring or offensive or anything like that. Like, it remains compelling, you know? There's enough heavy, ballsy riffs and beats and grooves to keep your attention. David Draymond just kind of going ham a lot of the time, which I appreciate. Honestly, I'm feeling a 3 out of 5. I mean, this thing is so fucking, like, over-the-top, stupid, and edgy and corny, but for all the right reasons, in all the right ways. So, fuck it, man. Go for it. Have fun. Jam this thing. If you got a soft spot for, like, late 90s, early 2000s, nu metal and alt metal, but somehow you skipped this, don't. Again, but check it out. Check it out. Why not? Fuck it. It's weirdly fun. Next up, we have Believe, released September 17th, 2002, via Reprise Records. And honestly, you can copy and paste a lot of what I said about The Sickness and apply it here, and that's fine and cool and good, because this is more or less a continuation of what The Sickness was doing. The peaks aren't quite as high, you know, stuff like Prayer, Liberate, it doesn't go quite as hard as something like Down with the Sickness or Stupefy, but, you know, it's consistently pretty entertaining. It's pretty catchy. I would argue it's a more cohesive and consistent album as a whole. Like, whereas The Sickness kind of had a lull after the first few tracks, this thing remains, like, pretty interesting. It consistently throws a lot of cool riffs and beats and shit at you. David just going more over the top ham with his, like, weird vocal antics and stuff. A lot of the hooks are also a little bit stronger, a little bit more anthemic as well. Like, Intoxication is cool, Mistress is cool, Liberate is really cool. Like, there's that kind of, like, weird kind of mumbly rap part in the very beginning. That makes for a pretty cool build-up into that really raucous, kind of over-the-top assault of, like, alt metal and nu metal riffery. I'm weirdly feeling a 3 out of 5 on this once again. Yeah, it's not perfect. It's not something I'm regularly going to jam, but again, if it much like The Sickness, if you got a soft spot for that late 90s, early 2000s alt metal shit, then you'll probably go nuts for this. Good for you. More power to you. I don't blame you. There's some cool shit here. You know, it's edgy, it's dumb, it's corny, just like The Sickness, but whatever. Next up, we have 10,000 Fists, released September 20th, 2005, via Reprise and Intoxication. And this is probably the band's most important album for a couple of reasons. For one, it sees them really beginning to shift away from, like, that kind of nu metal vibe and ethos and such. They never had much influence from the genre to begin with. They were always just kind of lumped in, but whatever influence they did have on records like The Sickness and Believe is starting to dissipate on 10,000 Fists. Starting to disappear, fade away. This is also their first album with The Guy, their official mascot, on the album cover, and it has some of their biggest hits, like the title track 10,000 Fists, and a cover of Land of Confusion, originally by Genesis. And it's fine. I'm not feeling this as much as I was feeling The Sickness and Believe, and I wasn't really feeling those, like, a ton to begin with. It's a fine record, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. This one, more so than the other records, is more one-dimensional because the entire mood and vibe of this album can just kind of be described as the world sucks, go fuck yourself, fuck politics, fuck it all, And I can appreciate that now and then, don't get me wrong. Like, that's why I like a lot of classic hardcore and, like, you know, grindcore and shit like that. But, like, you know, with something like Black Flag and Napalm Death, there's at least some kind of grander message. There's some substance to the music. Whereas this just kind of feels like a sonic middle finger constantly. And Disturbed are just kind of constantly waving it in my face. And I kind of want to take that finger and just snap it off. I'm like, get that shit out of my face, man. Like, they may as well have called this thing 10,000 Middle Fingers. For the record, you know, I'm not suggesting that this album needs to have something to say, but it clearly thinks that it does, and the fact that it actually doesn't is itself kind of annoying to me. Obnoxious, even. I mean, from, like, 10,000 Fists to Just Stop to I'm Alive, you know? I get this image of, like, the same 11-year-olds who were jamming Down with the Sickness being like, yeah, everything does suck. Fuck you. I don't have to do my algebra homework. Fuck you. Oh, man. The songs themselves, I guess, are fine. 10,000 Fists never really did much for me. I was never a huge fan of their cover of Land of Confusion either. I always thought the Genesis version was way, way better. I mean, Disturbed don't really do anything that interesting with this. It's basically just the original song with bigger metallic guitar tones and like, you know, some heavier double bass percussion and such. The album also has like a 56-minute runtime, nearly an hour long, clocking in with 14 tracks to be exact, assuming that is you're not including like the bonus tracks and such. So I would also argue, with that in mind, this thing is pretty fatty and bloated. You could easily trim like 4 or 5 songs off of this thing, and it would be a lot tighter in my opinion. Yeah, for this one, I'm honestly feeling a 2. There wasn't really much that I got out of this record. I just found it to be kind of obnoxious and silly, and not in a fun way like The Sickness or Believe. Yeah, I don't know. I guess if you're nostalgic for a period in your life where you just hated everything for literally no reason, maybe this would do it for you, but yeah, I'm not, so it ain't doing shit for me. Sorry, folks. Next up, we have Indestructible, released June 3rd, 2008, via Reprise Records, and it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Let's say something positive about this. Something positive. I like that this is darker in tone, lyrically, you know? Like, David Draymond is going into some more, like, personal and introspective territory. He's also talking about, the military and, like, kind of, like, about how dark the world is in, like, a really real way, as opposed to the 10,000 middle fingers up approach to 10,000 fists. This is reflected in the music as well, with some darker, heavier guitar tones, a couple more intricate grooves and rhythms here and there as well. It almost kind of feels like if Lamb of God tried to do a more straightforward kind of hard rock album. David Draymond sounding really confident, really passionate. He's really working hard to sell these lyrics and these tones and these vibes. I respect and appreciate the fuck out of that. The music doesn't do a lot for me, though. I found this to be just a kind of sleepy and predictable affair. Like, you know, it's great that this band got darker, but the enthusiasm that I saw from The Sickness and even from 10,000 Fists, you know, it feels muddied a little bit. It comes through on something like Haunted, which is like this very inspiring kind of stadium rock anthem with a darker twist. It comes through on like some of the hit singles as well, like the title track Indestructible and Inside the Fire, but yeah, some of the deeper cuts later on in the album, not so much. I'm feeling a 2.5 out of 5 on this. Once again, I appreciate Disturbed going into darker territory, trying to add some actual weight and substance to this, as opposed to just being like, fuck you, you know? I like that they're pulling from personal experiences, and in the case of David Draymond specifically, like a motorcycle accident and some bad relationships, and apparently even an attempted suicide. That's great. That's awesome. But, you know, the music, unfortunately, just isn't as interesting as everything else going on. And that's kind of a big problem because this is a music album with sounds and such, you know? Next up, we have Asylum, released August 31st, 2010, via Reprise Records. And we have arrived, ladies and gentlemen, at what I feel is Disturbed's best album to date, their most fully realized, their most mature, their most interesting, their most entertaining. Yeah, believe it or not, I really like this album. Disturbed is building on the darker themes and vibes and attitudes and concepts of Indestructible and sharpening their songwriting big time, upping the production value, and the result is something that is urgent, consistent, fun, while still having that kind of dark, edgy underbelly and underbite. You have The Infection, which is this moody kind of like alt metal kind of burner with like some sizzling hard rock guitar flavor. You have Another Way to Die, which is very slow and grim, and it has these huge chunky barrages of like groove metal muscle. Honestly, the title track Asylum might be one of my favorite songs from Disturbed altogether. I mean, it's sharp, it's filled with some great riffs. That hook is infectious. Like, I've caught myself singing that time and time again over the years. Like, this is one of their big hits that I actually knew beforehand, because, like, this was in one of the Rock Band games, if I'm not mistaken, and I would, like, hang out with my friends, and we'd play fucking Rock Band, and this is a song that they really liked, and I actually sung it with them, and it was fun and cool and good, so in a weird way, this is also nostalgic for me, too, at this point. I still think this song is really cool. Yeah, it's aged really well. I'm feeling a strong 3.5 out of 5. I think this is a very good album, very well performed, very well produced, very well executed. This is, in my opinion, their best album. Yeah, I got nothing else to say. It's actually a really good album. Next up, we have Immortalized, released August 21st, 2015 via Reprise and Warner Brothers Records. It's an album. It's fine. There was a bit of a hiatus shortly after the release of Asylum. You know, everyone kind of went in their own directions, kind of did their own things. Some people may remember David Draymond had Device, which was basically a more industrial alt-rock version of Disturbed. I think he produced the Trivium album as well. And, you know, after a few years being apart, they all came back together. And it's, yeah. Honestly, this whole thing just kind of feels like we're going through the motions. There's nothing really that urgent or exciting about this. It very much feels like Disturbed doing what is expected of them. Making, like, edgy fucking jams because that's what Disturbed is supposed to do. I don't find a lot of these tracks to be very interesting. They feel very paint by numbers, very meat and potatoes by the standards of Disturbed. I especially hate the cover of The Sound of Silence, originally from Simon and Garfunkel. I don't care that this was a big hit. This is one of the most pretentious, overblown, bombastic pieces of dog shit I think that has ever been recorded. Like, the original song is so beautiful in this really simple and bittersweet kind of way. You know, it's mournful, and it tackles depression and sadness and fear in a way that I think perfectly captures those emotions without being overbearing, you know? I mean, at no point are Simon and Garfunkel, like, bursting out in tears or something, you know? It's more like they're kind of singing this to themselves in a somber kind of way. Whereas Disturbed brings out the orchestra, and David Draymond belts it out like he's a goddamn opera singer, or like he's like fucking on stage with the cast of Les Mis or some shit. Like, it's a lot. It's so stupid, and it completely loses the beauty and the heart of the original song in the process. And everything else just like, like, I don't know, there's a couple of riffs and choruses here and there that are fine, but honestly, this feels like a sanitized version of 10,000 Fists, you know? Like, the vengeful one. Open your eyes. What are we doing? Like, whatever, man. It's clear that Disturbed just kind of want to, like, throw out all these, like, platitudes and all these like vague descriptions of how the world is going on, as opposed to really tackling anything of weight or substance or importance or meaning. Yeah, solid 1.5 out of 5 for me. I honestly think this is a pretty bad record. Yeah. Not their worst, though. To be fair, not their worst. That distinct honor, ladies and gentlemen, belongs to Evolution, released October 19th, 2018 via Reprise and Warner Brothers. Yikes, where do I even begin with this one? In some ways, this thing is business as usual, some more vague, meaningless lyrics about government and war and politics. It's bad! No specific reason, no need to go into details because we don't want to alienate or divide or infuriate anyone or any group of people or whatever the fuck. But there are two distinct differences, I would say, from this and like another Disturbed album, like say 10,000 Fists or Asylum or something. For one, the production is awful. Like for a big rock band like Disturbed to have released something this terribly produced kind of blows my mind. The guitars have this really annoying, buzzing, humming sound to them. Drums have no impact whatsoever. Everything just sounds so stale and like stagnant and like lifeless and digital and compressed. The other issue is that this thing is by design meant to be a much more accessible album. David Draymond regularly compared this in interviews to the Black Album. He wanted to build on the momentum of The Sound of Silence and to introduce more melodicism and some more kind of basic hard rock numbers and some more ballads and such, which, I don't know, fine in theory, I guess, but yeah, in execution, yeah. I mean, songs like Are You Ready, No More, A Reason to Fight, Stronger on Your Own, it's some of the most bland, flavorless, simplistic butt rock I've heard outside of Trapped, a lot of like fake electronic drums, a lot of really generic, repetitive, ham-fisted riffs. The ballads on here are pretty lame too, a very transparent attempt to just kind of like have a song as big as The Sound of Silence. It's as if Disturbed's entire songwriting process for the ballad specifically was, well, The Sound of Silence was a ballad, so obviously if we just have a ballad, it'll be a big hit like The Sound of Silence was. And there's no, like, actual thought or care that was really put into it. David has also pretty much abandoned all the weird little vocal antics that he would do normally on a Disturbed album. I mean, there's been less and less of them pretty much since Asylum, mind you, but now they're officially gone, and honestly, I kind of miss them. I mean, he's a strong vocalist. He's probably the best thing on this album, to be honest, but, like, you know, those little vocal tics, they had a lot of character, you know? They were unique. They were weird, kind of dumb, but they were his. And now that they're gone, you know, this just doesn't feel like Disturbed anymore, you know? This feels like Disturbed making a really basic rock album. Like, really fucking basic. Like, they listened to Trapped and 3 Days Grace, and they were like, all right, let's just do that. Yeah, 1 out of 5. This is their worst album. This is a terrible album. It is not good. It has a lot of not good qualities about it, all of which I have discussed. And did I mention that it's not good and that it's terrible? Because it's not good and also terrible. So yeah. Voila! Reviewing every Disturbed album. I did not, contrary to popular belief, hate every single album. I hated like one of them. And talked shit about a solid chunk of them. But I really dug Asylum. And there were parts of Believe in the Sickness that I enjoyed as well. So hopefully, you know, hopefully it all makes sense and it's not too, you know, like, what a hater, what an elitist. But whatever, if that is the case, so be it. I mean, that's what we got for reviewing every Korn album, even though I really liked about half of the albums we talked about in that video, so whatever. What's your favorite album from Disturbed? What are your favorite songs from Disturbed? How would you rank their discography? How would you rate each individual album? Tell me in the comment section below. Please and thank you. Press this button to subscribe for updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.